Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the GDE Report. I am D.
And I'm Gene.
Great to see everybody. We've got a lot of great topics. It's hard for us, so much going on in the news to pick one topic. So we're going to do a round robin today. G-Man, you feeling okay today?
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
got about 50 days till the election.
less than 2 months. So it's fast approaching.
Things are heating up. We'll be soon. I think it's the first debate the 29th. Is that right?
I think that's right. Let me just double check that while we're chit-chatting.
We've got three presidential debates and one vice presidential debate coming up. If they happen, if Trump goes ahead and does it, he keeps talking about Joe Biden making these wild accusations that Joe Biden's on drugs or something, which I think could be his excuse to not participate.
Right. Yeah, the first one is scheduled for September 29th. Then October 7th is the vice presidential debate. Then October 15th and the 22nd are the last two presidential debates.
Yeah, interesting times. We've talked about this before, but most times the sitting president struggles in the first debate. Trump could,
Right.
hey, he could beat the curve. You never know.
Yeah.
He's used to performing on TV and performing in those types of settings. So maybe he performs really strong. Who knows? But typically, sitting presidents go into it thinking I've been through it, and they haven't had he hasn't had a debate in a while. So, whereas Biden had to go through the primary process.
Right.
But
Well,
go ahead.
more importantly, Trump's used to making up his own facts. So
Well, I don't think that'll stop in the debate.
I don't either.
He tends to do that anyway. So it'll be a lot of fun. We'll have some special topics about that coming up. Today we want to start off talking about we've got some new polling numbers out, particularly in the Lone Star State. So G, tell us what you found in the latest poll numbers in Texas.
Yes. So 538, Nate Silver's site, they do an excellent job of tracking the polls, and their methodology is pretty sound. I like them right behind Survey USA, which we've talked about before. But the Lone Star State has been for 20 plus years reliably red. I think in the last presidential election, the only state that beat it for being red was Oklahoma, your state. But there's a little bit of a renaissance. Some people had predicted that because of the Hispanic population growth, that by 2024, it actually would turn blue, as Hispanics tend to side with the Democrats for the most part. But the latest poll shows Trump with a 47.7% people supporting him, and Biden with 46.7. So we're looking at a 1% difference with 50 days to go. So there's a possibility now, having grown up in that state, knowing how they think, I think it's remote. I think Trump will pull it out, but for a Democrat to be this close to the election is simply amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and Texas is a state that Trump has to win.
Yep.
I mean, there's still mathematical ways for him to win, but if he loses Texas, I think that's a pretty big bellwether for the entire country.
Yeah, if Biden takes New York and California, which he will, and then he takes Texas, it's pretty much game over for Mr. Trump.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a challenge. It'll be interesting. We've talked, I think we touched on it a little bit. We didn't go into a lot of detail, but it's also a Senate race, U.S. Senate race going on there with MJ Hagar, a veteran Air Force pilot, I believe, and she is battling against John Cornyn, and so it could be some maybe a little bit of down ballot drama as well. If Biden were to carry the state, could lead Hagar across, the first Democratic senator in Texas since Lloyd Benson.
Right, and that, according to 538, that poll, that race is now at 44% Cornyn, 40% Hagar. So 4%, that's a pretty decent showing for a Democrat at this stage. And it could turn out that, like you said, if enough people turn out for Biden, that could bring Hagar across the line in that race.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you, but since you mentioned the Latino vote in Texas, I want to jump over to Florida because there was an interesting poll that came out this week by NBC News and Marist as well that showed that in the state of Florida, President Trump and former Vice President Biden were tied at 48% each among likely voters, which we know, again, Florida is a must-win for Trump. One of the through lines in that poll, though, that stood out was among Latinos in Florida, Trump is leading 50% to 46%, which has caused quite a bit of alarm in the Biden campaign and in Democratic circles all around the country. And so much so that Michael Bloomberg announced yesterday, I believe, that he's going to drop about $100 million into the state of Florida, particularly targeting Latino voters. What do you think? Any explanations for those kind of numbers for Trump among Latinos in Florida?
Yeah, well, what I think is, Obama opened up Cuba, and a lot of Republicans were up in arms about that, even though we do business with and can travel to every other communist country in the world, including Vietnam, who we were at war with. And then Trump came along and he closed it back up. And there's still a lot of anti-Cuban sentiment in South Florida, where there's a huge Cuban Hispanic population. So I think that's the Cubans coming out basically to say thanks for, putting the screws back to our old country. That's what I think.
Yeah, when you look at the breakdown from 2016, Hillary Clinton won Latinos in Florida with 62% to 35% for Trump. But if you break that down by Cuban Americans, Trump won that 54 to 41. So I definitely think there's some play there. I think that there's the other thing I think that the Democrats have to be very careful about with lots of groups, but particularly with Latinos, is that it's not a monolithic group that votes all one way or all another way. There's a lot of lot of faith-based Latinos that either the Catholic faith or evangelical faith is very strong in their families, and they vote on family issues, things like abortion, marriage equality.
Right.
Those are things that they vote on. So I think there has to be some consideration there. Some of these things, I think there's a little bit of lag time because of the delay in Biden's campaign actually winning the nomination. Even though he seemed like he won it early, he came from nothing when it came to, you look at January and February where his fundraising was. He really had to raise a ton of funds fast. And so I think we'll see a lot of outreach besides the Michael Bloomberg outreach. I think we'll see a lot more. Right. And those numbers will probably tighten up considerably. But I do think you're right on the Cuban population. There's definitely some strong ties to and they've historically been tied to the Republican Party anyway, but definitely with Trump's actions in regards to Cuba. Let's jump back across the country to kind of like American Airlines used to do with my baggage. We'll go from Texas to Florida to Arizona. How about that?
Sure. I just wanted to say before we moved on that 538 has Biden up 2.86% over Trump in Florida. So,
wow.
So moving on to Arizona, Biden, surprisingly, because that's, Arizona is traditionally another red state, he has a decent lead. He's up 5.1%, 49.5 to 44.4 over Trump. And if the graph is any indication, it looks like Trump is starting to drop in that state. So, that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And Arizona has shifted more and more towards the Democrats. The last election, Kirsten Sinema won that Senate race. It was a squeaker, but she did beat Martha McSally, who then was appointed. That was Jeff Flake's seat. And then when Senator McCain passed away, then the Republican governor turned around and appointed McSally to that seat. She's not very well liked at all. And so that could be a little case of the tail wagging the dog. Mark Kelly, the astronaut, we've talked about him, is running for that seat, and also married to Gabby Giffords.
Right.
There, the former congresswoman who was tragically shot, but did survive at one of her campaign events. So Mark Kelly's super popular candidate, polling really well. Biden's polling really well. There's also some, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know in Florida we just talked about, and in Arizona too, there are some trends on the retiree side, which typically have voted Republican for some reason. I don't really know why.
Right.
They keep talking about privatizing Social Security, but some of the retirees are shifting towards Biden, and I think some of that could be the sense to want to return to normalcy, and some of the just tiresome antics of Trump and the way he tweets. But Arizona is going to be a really interesting state, because if you look at the traditional Sun Belt states of Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado, if Biden were to win all those states and the polls were to hold up on the Senate side of things, you're going to look at, I know it's going to be a tight one potentially in Colorado, but you could look at the first time since the early 60s that Democrats have carried all those states in a presidential election and had all the sitting U.S. senators.
Right. Yeah. So 538 has Kelly up by 7 points. And interesting, and that poll was concluded on September the 11th. Now in Colorado, the latest poll numbers are from August 28th through September 1st. And they've got Hickenlooper up with a 10-point lead, 52-42 over Cory Gardner. And like we've talked about in the past, I think it's going to be, as it is with any election, voter turnout. Now, one difference in Colorado than a lot of other states is we're totally mail-in ballot. And, what we're seeing across the country is Democrats are requesting far more mail-in ballots than the Republicans, in some cases by 1 million or more. So it'll be interesting to see how Colorado goes. Now, we haven't gotten our ballots. We don't get them for another month. But it'll be interesting to see how that race turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. One other point I'll make on Arizona is, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, Martha McSally was really struggling on fundraising, and she made the pretty big mistake, I believe. She said that families should consider fasting a meal and taking that money and donating to her campaign, which seems pretty tone deaf considering the COVID situation we're in right now, with a lot of people struggling to make ends meet, worried about her campaign being funded.
Right. That's that harkens back to Marie Antoinette and let them eat cake.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Anything else stick out to you in those poll numbers that you saw recently?
No, there is one thing I wanted to point out as well. Colorado is in our Attorney General here has sued the U.S. Postal Service, and in the first round was successful. So what the Postal Service is doing is they're sending out a mailer, a typical campaign, piece that basically says, request your ballots, early, and, make sure you mail them in 7 days before the deadline, blah, blah, blah. And our Attorney General has basically said this doesn't apply to Colorado. It's misleading. It could cause a lot of confusion, which I got mine yesterday in the mail and looked at it, and I do believe it would cause a lot of confusion. And so our Attorney General sued to get that blocked, and the court agreed. Now the USPS says they're going to appeal that. So that's another little, issue we'll want to follow.
Yeah, did you say you did receive the mailer?
I did. Yep, I got it.
I did as well, and
right.
In Oklahoma, and it just seems like the narrative's being written before the story happens.
Yep.
And so lots of built-in excuses, and it's going to could be a long couple of months from November to December.
Yes, it very well could be. And our Attorney General's point was in Colorado, we have multiple drop-off points. So in Lakewood, where I live, there's we're a population of about 120,000, and there's got to be 20 or more drop-off points for people to drop their ballots. To just, you just drive by and drop it. And on next door, there's people that are volunteering. If you if you can't get out, or you can't drive, or you don't have any relatives that'll do it for you, they'll come by and pick up your ballot and ensure that it gets to the ballot box for you.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it's I think the whole thing, hopefully as a country we survive this election, and hopefully reason wins out, and we can put some election reforms and things like that in place nationwide. There's no reason that we all shouldn't be voting on the same types of systems throughout the entire country, safe, secure, remote. There's lots of ways we can do it, but it seems like we're going to have to get the Republicans on board that they agree that more people voting is a good thing, because it seems like anything that gets passed or initiatives to try to get more people to vote and participate seems to be what they try to resist.
Right.
So, all right, let's talk about, we don't necessarily have to talk about the substance of what happened, but let's talk about President Trump had a rally this weekend in Nevada,
right,
and in Henderson, and it was an indoor rally. The rules, the state law or state, I don't know if it's law or if it's just the state executive orders in place from the governor there, say that no congregation of people should be more than 50 plus people indoors.
right.
And this rally obviously had way more than 50 people. And Trump basically flouted the rules and just said, we're going to do it. We'll take people's temperature on the way in. We'll hand them a mask. It's up to them if they want to wear it. And when you saw the press coverage, not very many people had them on. So I guess my question to you is, are there two systems? Do the rules apply differently to different people or to one particular person?
Well, one of the arguments about the justice system has always been that there's two different systems, one for the rich and one for the rest of us. And so, I would say that, in Mr. Trump's world, there definitely is a difference. He thinks that he doesn't have to play by the rules. And I think that's what his supporters like about him, that he flaunts the rules and gets away with it, and nobody calls him on it. I mean, if you and I were going to go there and have some sort of rally, and had a bunch of people, say 75 or 100 or even more, the state authorities would come in and shut us down, and maybe, would definitely issue citations and maybe even arrests. So,
absolutely. To me, it just plays right along with the information that came out in the Bob Woodward book about him knowing in late January, early February, how deadly the virus was, how it was airborne, how it could be contracted, and it was 5 times more deadly than the regular flu. Yet he went out still and insisted to the public that the flu was more deadly. He wouldn't push for a mask ordinance. He wouldn't do anything like that. He just seems to want to flout the health of his supporters and the health of everyone, just to keep up a narrative where, to me, when he could have sealed this election a long time ago in January, February, it was actually a political opportunity for him to be a uniter and for him to be a leader and to step up and say, I'm going to lead the whole country in this case. But he chose not to.
Right.
And he continues to choose that, to flout the rules. I mean, he was insulting reporters at a press conference on, I believe it was Saturday, where he tried to get a reporter to take their mask off when they were asking him a question because he said he couldn't hear them. And it's just like, why would you continue to make fun of masks? Why would you continue to try to flout that? Other than, like you said, his supporters really love that kind of stuff. And that's about 40% of the country. Right. The question is, how's that going to sell with the other 10% that he needs to win over. And is it going to sell short? Is it going to be one of those things where people say enough is enough? We need somebody who can actually lead on this kind of stuff, or not?
Right. Well, like we've talked about, it's, 50 days out is still an eternity in politics. I mean, um, we saw in the last election, what Comey released had his press conference about Hillary's emails about 2 weeks out.
Right.
And that, we know from exit polls and interviews since that in those swing states of, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, that swayed a lot of voters to either not go to the polls or to vote for Mr. Trump. So there's still a lot of time and a lot of things can happen, but as you said, we'll see how if he gets that 10%, and we'll see how well he holds that 40%, because I've seen some poll numbers that say he's only got about 36% right now. So
yeah, fair enough. I think you made some good points. I mean, 50 days out, a lot of things can happen. We've got the debates coming up. We already mentioned.
Yep.
We've already talked about October surprises. The John Durham report, I believe, is out there where Attorney General Barr wants to rush that out, where they're trying to investigate the investigators and come up with some kind of grand conspiracy out of thin air that the FBI was biased against Trump. So I look to see Barr have some kind of announcement on that, whether it's valid or not, because it's never done.
They just had their number 2 in that investigation quit because of what she perceived as politicization and basically not being fair. So now, to be fair, she was a Democrat. She was handpicked by the Republican who's leading that investigation. But to me, that says a lot.
Yeah, I think she and Durham have worked together for many years, though. So she's a pretty valued assistant to him as far as working on other cases.
Right.
The other thing is, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for Biden for the polls to tighten up, because what tends to happen is when a Democrat shows a lead, their turnout goes down.
Yep.
And so I think Democratic voters need that push to get out to the polls sometimes and to get their ballots in. And because some people think, oh, it's a done deal, I don't need to vote. And I think there was some apathy with that last time. People weren't necessarily fired up about Hillary, and they just didn't vote. And so I think Biden needs all the fired up voters he can get.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And as we've talked before, it's a numbers game. The more you can get your side to turn out, the better off you're going to be. And enthusiasm. Pollsters talk about enthusiasm. It sure seems like Democrats, despite what the other side would have you believe, are really enthused about supporting this ticket, and can't wait to cast their ballots. So we'll see how things go on election night.
Absolutely, which leads us to our PSA, and every one of these we'll give throughout the rest of this time, this year, and probably moving on too. But be sure and get registered to vote if you're not. Learn your state's requirements. If you feel more comfortable voting absentee or by mail, get registered for that. There's typically deadlines out to get that done. We've already talked about the Postal Service and delays. In many states, the ballots only count if they arrive by election day. So if your ballot arrives the day after election in many states, it's not going to count. So be sure and understand the rules, understand what you've got to do to get your ballot turned in, and make your voice heard, because as we always say, democracy is not a spectator sport.
Right. Well, the other thing too is make sure that you're actually, even though you think you might be registered, call your county, call your state, and make sure that you're actually on the rolls. So in places like Georgia and Alabama, where they've had a lot of voter purges in recent years, you may actually, even though you think you're registered, you may not be, because they've, if you didn't vote in the last couple of elections, they may have deemed you, not in the state anymore and have taken you off the rolls. And that's exactly what happened to about 200,000 people in Georgia in the last gubernatorial election. So, we don't want a repeat of that. So make sure you're on the rolls.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you here in a few days with our next episode.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.